Welcome to a special virtual edition of the Skeptics track at Dragoncon. And now, your host, Angie Mackey.
Hello and welcome to our live streaming Skeptic track for Dragoncon 2020. I'm Dr. Angie, I'm your assistant track director. With us today we have Matt Dillahunty, who is joining us from Texas. Thank you so much for being with us today, Matt. He's the long-standing host of the Atheist Experience and is a pretty darn good skeptic, so we're happy to have him.
How you doing?
Doing great.
I had this up on the other monitor, and so I was like looking up sky towards heaven. I was looking towards heaven to see you.
Yes. Well, anyway, so we're happy to have you. This is, one of the benefits of this whole pandemic thing, if there could be said to be one, is that we get to have folks from all over the world. We just had Leo Igwe with talk with Jamie in Swiss. We've had folks from Australia. We've had Denmark. We've had just a really wonderful mix of folks, and we're happy that you could join us from Texas today.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Okay. Well, tell us what you said you had some stuff you would start out with, and then we'll take questions. The live chat is open for questions.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you for inviting me back. I realize this is all rushed. I wasn't even sure there was going to be one. Last year I was at Dragoncon. It was my first year. I freaking loved it. Had a great time. And people were like, oh, you have to come back next year. And I was like, yes, I will come back next year. I will come back every year that you want me. And then the whole world kind of shuts down. And I was like, oh, I don't get to go to Dragoncon this year. And here we are.
Yay.
And so I'm looking forward to the world getting back to normal. And next year I've been pretty much locked in my house since March with a couple of exceptions. And for those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm Matt Dillahunty. I'm the president of the Atheist Community of Austin and the host of the Atheist Experience TV show and a number of other things. I'm a skeptic, a humanist, and an atheist, and pretty much in that order is if I had to rank them on the importance, I don't care, despite the fact that I focus primarily on religion, and religion I think is an important topic, which is part of what I'm going to talk about today. My skepticism is far more important to me than my atheism, and my humanism is far more important to me than my atheism. And so I'm happy to be here with you virtually. I'll give virtual hugs to anybody who wants them, and real hugs once this pandemic's over. For those who aren't familiar, the Atheist Experience is a live call-in television program or internet program now that's been running for 24 years, and I've been hosting it for 15. Actually, yeah, this is the 15th year that I've been the host of the Atheist Experience. And we have the conversations with theists. It potentially gets kind of heated on occasion. And yesterday was no exception. I was trying to maintain my zen. And of course, somebody calls in and decides to do something a little bit racist, or somebody else comes in and tries to make excuses for slavery, or somebody calls in and says, hey, I know there's no good we can have conversations about that may be productive. But occasionally there's just going to be roadblocks and barriers that are going to keep us from really understanding what other people are talking about. Sorry, I want to make sure the internet gets back. There was a little internet hiccup there for it's evidently my router has decided to wear a mask. So there's a number of things. I had a really good conversation with someone the other night who was a new kind of atheist speaker. They're doing stuff on YouTube, and they're interested in getting better at debating, which is what my Atheist Debates project is about, a number of other things. And we had those conversations, and that plus a few things that have happened in the last couple of weeks led me to some points that I thought I would bring up today that might be of use to skeptics at Dragoncon, particularly if you're going to be having conversations about religion. And so one of the statements that we've heard over and over again for years is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And by and large, pretty much every skeptic I've met will utter that at some point, and everybody will take it as a truism. And it is. As far as I can tell, it's true. I just released a video specifically on this topic this past month. And the point that I was trying to make is that it's confusing to some people and not confusing to others. When you say, hey, here's an extraordinary claim, it's going to require extraordinary evidence before I would be willing to accept, or before I should rationally and skeptically be giving my assent to this is likely the case. And for many skeptics, it just makes sense. And yet I hear from people who aren't skeptics, and they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean extraordinary claims required? Why wouldn't claims all require, just whatever evidence they require? And that's true too. the most accurate way to say it is that the quality and quantity of evidence that makes it warranted to believe a particular claim is pretty much the same across the board. The difference is in the claims, which is why we say extraordinary claims. But somebody will come up to me and say, but Matt, what makes a claim extraordinary? How do you know that a claim is extraordinary? How can you even say that? And this is the thing that I was trying to explain as clearly as possible for the last 15 years on the show, and it doesn't always work. Because the truth is, there is a claim, and when you say that the claim is extraordinary, what you're saying is this claim is not consistent with what I already know about reality. When we look at mundane claims, like I just bought a new car, or I just got a new partner, or whatever else, those things are consistent with reality. You know, hey, I just got a cell phone. Oh, yes, I can show it to you. But even without evidence, if I just said, hey, I got a new cell phone yesterday, nobody's going to go, you know, that Dillahunty guy, maybe he didn't get a cell phone. Maybe this is some kind of trick. Okay, to be fair, somebody will likely say something like that at some point.
Well, wait a minute now. So we were not on the phone, and I was trying to get you to come here, and you tried to pull a thing on me.
I did, because you were like, oh, I'm not that gullible, and I said, waited a couple seconds. Said, oh my, hang on, the room's on fire. Just and moved out of the way. And of course, Angie, being a good skeptic, did not fall for it and caught my joke.
I just said you were yelling, so I stopped talking. So I was waiting to see what happened next.
If there is a house fire, let me just not talk and let him deal with that.
Yeah, pretty much, because he doesn't need my input. I can't help at that point. But yeah. I'm sorry, please go on with the cell phone comment.
Oh, no, that's fine. So this whole thing about extraordinary claims is that what you're really talking about is this claim consistent with the evidence? And if you consider like a balance scale of when it's going to tip, when I say something like, I just got a new cell phone, that claim is so consistent with reality that there's a mountain of evidence already for it. We know that cell phones exist. We know that people get new cell phones. We know that people stand in line and wait for new cell phones. We know every aspect of this is something that we are all familiar with. And that is why that would be a sort of mundane claim. But hey, I was abducted by aliens last night. That would be extraordinary because we don't have within our understanding of what is real and true in the world, this notion that aliens are actually visiting and actually abducting people. Similarly, if somebody says, oh, I spoke to a dead loved one last night, or God came and told me where my car keys were. For skeptics, for non-believers, for critical thinkers, there are claims that we're going to look at as extraordinary that other people are going to look at and say, that's not extraordinary, because their view of the world already includes magic is real. Their view of the world already begins with there is some God being who created everything, who put us in this world and gave us a brain to figure it out. And because their worldview already contains that, the claims that they hear from religious advocates or from superstitious woo peddlers don't seem extraordinary. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem, if you think that, yeah, you know, hey, I already kind of believe that crystal vibrations, I mean, it's vibrations, it's energy. I don't know anything about science. I don't know what's going on. So it kind of fits with my worldview. And I already believe in some other stuff. And so there may be this supernatural realm. And all of a sudden, the extraordinary claims no longer feel extraordinary. And so one of the things that I think the skeptic community may continue to do, I know there are plenty of people who've done this, but we have to work on changing the things that people already accept. It's not like there's any new claim. It's not, you know, we didn't just discover that there are claims about aliens yesterday or claims about God the day before that. These things have been going on for the entirety of humanity's existence of, hey, I've got a belief. Is it warranted? This is the thing that, you know, being a skeptic, the goal should be to have as many true beliefs and as few false beliefs as possible, to have your internal map of reality match reality as best you can. And so it's really worthwhile to get people to question what they already believe. Now, some of you have heard, like I have, that evidently you can't reason someone out of something that they weren't reasoned into to begin with. It will come as no surprise to some of you, absolutely despise bumper sticker philosophy and the McNuggets of philosophy, because quite often they're truisms that aren't quite as true as you might think. You could say that the whole extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence is better represented as, hey, every claim requires however much evidence is sufficient. And it's not so much that the claim is extraordinary, it's better described as the claim is not consistent with what we already know. And the key then is, okay, what about, how do you know if what you know is wrong? And when you say that you can't reason someone out of something they weren't reasoned into, what we're generally saying, and this tends to come up most with religion, is, hey, this was an emotional plea. It was an indoctrination. It's not like somebody, you know, sat around and thought and evaluated and came to the conclusion that there was a God or there was magic. And so they weren't reasoned into it. And so you're never going to change their mind by reasoning. And I find that to be not only incredibly pessimistic, but obviously and demonstrably false. Because everything that you believe, every position you hold, everything you ever have accepted is something that you have become convinced of. It's a process. You're presented with a claim, you're presented with the arguments and evidence for the claim. You can be convinced for really, really bad reasons, but you became convinced and it's still reasoning. I don't know how to change anyone's mind with anything other than reasoning. It doesn't even make sense to me to say, oh, you can't reason somebody out. No, how do you change anybody's mind in any other way? I mean, even if you went with just like physical force of, I'm going to put a gun to your head and you're going to change your mind, what you're getting there is somebody changing what they say, but not necessarily what they believe. And as I was a fundamentalist Christian for more than 25 years, was studying to be a pastor, the overwhelming majority of people who've been involved with the Atheist Experience and the atheist community of Austin are all formerly religious. The thousands of people who have emailed over the years that we've been hosting the show to say, thank you for helping me be a better skeptic. Thank you for helping me find my way out of religion. Demonstrate, I'm walking, talking proof, not only that I can change my mind, but that after having changed my mind, interacting with other people can help them change theirs. It's a give up move to say, well, you know, you can't argue with those faith heads and you can't.
Got him?
Your audio's dropped out again.
Uh-oh. Oh, no. Oh, Matt.
Matt, can you hear me?
Hmm.
I'm going to go back to you, Andy. I'm going to put you on.
Well, I'm going to text Matt and so let him know that we can't hear him, that we can see him. So we are using that very cell phone that he didn't believe that I have. So talk amongst yourselves, please. Well, but I just, so hopefully he'll catch on fairly quickly. We ought to do some bad lip reading or something. But yeah, I don't think he knows. Hey, Matt, we can't hear you. If he's looking at me, you can't hear you. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Oh, goodness gracious. I'm hoping he's looking at the stream and he can see. No, we can't hear you. Okay, well, so I guess I'll vamp. So, there you are.
No, that's me. That's John.
Oh. Okay. No. This will be fun, right? Comedy segment. Oh, me? Song and dance? Tap dance, no. Knees, arthritis. So, well, we've had a terrific weekend, and if there are any speakers that you would like to see on the Skeptic track, please email either Derek Colanduno or me. Derek is Derek at skeptrack.org or Angie at skeptrack.org. That's Derek, DEREK, at skeptrack.org, or Angie, ANGIE, at skeptrack.org. And let us know if there are any speakers that you would like to see. Let us know how you liked any of the presentations. We've been very pleased with the lineup this year and are very excited about the possibility of actually being able to hold a conference in person next year. We've gotten really good feedback on our input. Make sure that you go back and watch the other videos that we've had. The interview with Mark Ditzler and the who is the producer of the Skeptic Track live stream and all of our video productions, interviewed the senior chair for Dragoncon. I want to
Test.
make sure I get their names right. Rachel Reeves, who is the co-chair and senior director of Dragoncon, and Rebecca.
Regina.
Oh, excuse me, Regina
Kirby.
Kirby. Yeah. Yes, of Dragoncon. Sorry, I'm trying to improvise quickly.
We're going back. We're going back.
We have Matt back. Wonderful.
Yeah, where did you lose me? So that is entirely a known audio problem on my end.
Oh.
And I was trying to watch it, but I was also trying to look at the screen. So I apologize. I don't know when I cut out.
You know, I'm not so sure either. I texted you to let you know that we lost you, but so make sure you have your phone up just in case it happens again.
I do have my phone out and I had it muted.
Oh,
Right.
well,
Because I'm on a thing. But
that's okay. That's okay.
we could. I'll wrap this up because it's a lot of loose points together about the value.
I'll tell you where you were. You said that it was emotionally driven. About the belief is emotionally driven.
Okay.
And then reasoning someone out of an emotionally driven decision.
Right. One of the things is the process here, and this is where skepticism, critical thinking become incredibly important, is to say, hey, why did you believe that? For years on the show, the question was, tell me what you believe and why. And the why is the more important part. The what just establishes what we're actually going to be speaking about. But the why you believe is is what we need to actually address. Because if you believe something for bad reasons and I can show that they're bad, if you believe something for emotional reasons and I can show that that shouldn't be enough to convince you, then I don't have to prove that your position is false. I don't have to show you there is no God. I don't have to show you aliens didn't visit you. All I have to demonstrate is that you didn't have a good reason to believe that you, like everybody else, are merely human. You're prone to making mistakes. You're prone to flawed thinking. You are prone to overestimating the significance and the power and accuracy of your own brain and your own mind. And that's okay. First of all, we need to get people comfortable with saying, I don't know. We also need to get people comfortable with saying, I was wrong. And now I'm glad I don't have to be wrong anymore. It's not being wrong that is the thing we're afraid of, because being wrong feels like being right until you know you're wrong. It's being exposed as being wrong that is the big problem. So the last bit here before I go to questions is that people have for years told me, oh, well, skepticism doesn't take a position on religion because religions are unfalsifiable. And I've replied many times with, actually, it does take a position in the sense that what skepticism would say, if a claim is unfalsifiable, then there cannot be sufficient reason to believe it. Because until something is potentially falsifiable, you have no way of knowing whether or not you are accepting something that could be shown to be false, or if you're setting up a sort of win-win scenario. And I focus on religion primarily because of my background. It's not the only area where I'll have conversations and debate. It's primarily still focused on skepticism and humanism, but I do run the Atheist Experience. I am starting a new show. The first episode is going to air this Thursday on Jimmy Snow's The Line Network, and it's going to be called The Hang Up, because evidently people found it amusing that I would hang up on people. But skepticism can have a position. If skeptics concluded, for example, that homeopathy hasn't demonstrated efficacy, which is probably the right way to say it, because skepticism, as we all know, isn't about debunking. It's about attempting to confirm something and then either confirming it or failing. And so if homeopathy continually demonstrates that it can't demonstrate any efficacy, can't show that it does anything, then we kind of colloquially say, homeopathy's BS. It doesn't pass the sniff test. And if we can say that about something like homeopathy, then we can also say it about prayer, intercessory or otherwise, and we can say it about faith healing. And so all of these things tie in. We may not be able to demonstrate that a particular God claim is false, or that a particular religious claim is false, or that a particular superstitious or supernatural claim is false. But if we can demonstrate that there's no good reason to believe that it's true, that fundamentally changes the baseline that someone's starting with and how many of those poison pills are potentially within their worldview. So religion, for me, is a symptom of bad thoughts and fears and indoctrination and uncertainty, and it's the cause of much grief. And because it impacts so many more people on a daily basis than homeopathy or Bigfoot or aliens or crystal vibrations, it is, for me, the biggest elephant in the room. But as someone who respects and values the broader skeptic community, I realize that we need people working on all kinds of things. So some of us can focus on religion, some of us can focus on debate, some of us can focus on education, some of us can focus on science education. All of us, though, I think should be focused on people, what beliefs they hold, and why they hold them. Because we know we can change minds. We know that we can get people to be less wrong. That is the trend towards which all of science and all of our pursuit of knowledge and understanding, that is the trend that we've been following this entire time. It is why we are in a better position than ever, despite how it feels to be in a world essentially handcuffed by a pandemic. Mm-hmm. To sit around and watch people deny the science, deny the facts is incredibly frustrating. As I said at the start, I've been sitting at home almost exclusively since March. I did a debate March 1st in New York City with Dinesh D'Souza, and then I came home and I had been exposed to someone who may have been exposed, so I self-quarantined. And then as soon as my self-quarantine was over, the mayor of Austin put us basically on stay-at-home orders and has extended that through December 15th. Atheist Experience is doing the show remotely. The whole world is changing. What hasn't changed is the frustration I feel every single day when I see someone who is a decent person, who's well-intentioned, who's not an idiot, who just has come across bad information and has bad processes to try to figure out whether or not that information is good. Oh, I heard it from this source. Is that enough? Is that enough for me to stay at home? Oh, this whole COVID thing, that's a big hoax. It's fake news, whatever. I have friends who have contracted it. I know of people who have been near death. I don't have anybody personally close to me who have died. And as I sit here, I was assaulted at a gas station for daring to suggest that somebody should have a mask on when the sign and the state the city requirements were to have a mask on. They came out and they were so angry that I would say, hey, we're supposed to have a mask on, that they punched my truck and tried to chase me down. It can be terrifying. The world can be terrifying, and watching what people can do can be terrifying. Mm-hmm. But with a little empathy, a little compassion, and a lot of understanding of how people think and how people get it wrong, we can all work together as skeptics to teach people how to be less wrong.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny you mentioned that, well, not funny, I mean, it's conspicuous, like you said, the 800-pound gorilla, that the trend to be less wrong, I can't think of any better recent examples than this whole pandemic, because the coronavirus, we've watched science in real time as we've learned things about this virus, and we've had to adjust our behavior or adjust our recommendations among and between physicians and patients, and then folks will come out with something like, well, we don't know anything. I'm like, well, no, we know a lot of things. We and are daily refining our knowledge. So, and I've already had even nursing staff and others say that they won't get a vaccine. I said, you don't even know what they're, we don't even have one really yet to refuse. We don't know enough about it for you to have already made that decision. Yes, there are things in progress. Yes, there are, we know a lot about vaccines. We know a lot about coronavirus. We are still learning about all the other things, but they're refusing to get a thing that it doesn't even exist really yet for everyone. So anyway,
I hear people saying, like one of the common things they say is, well, the scientists keep changing their minds. Like science got it wrong, and then they found out they got it wrong, and they tell us this, and they tell us that, and then they tell us a news story. You just never can trust that science stuff because it always keeps coming up with a new story. And the thing that they don't understand is that the only thing that has ever corrected science in the entire history of the world is more and science. Better science. Yes. And when they say this, it's like, oh, you can't trust science because it keeps changing. What you can't trust is something that doesn't change and started off wrong.
Right. Yeah, I agree 100%. Sorry, I didn't mean to get off on a rant there, but it affects my day-to-day life in all the ways. And
yes.
So it's a very, very frustrating thing for me. So can you see how the society seems to be more credible than ever? Does it seem to you that, or is it just my skewed visualization, or can you comment on that?
Oh, wait.
That appearance.
So
that
I see how
that society seems to be more credulous than ever. Like they seem to believe things more rapidly that's nonsense, or at least doesn't have enough evidence behind it to support.
I'm not quite that pessimistic, but I definitely see what you're asking about, and I kind of agree. It's just that I think there's a little curious thing happening here, which is this: I don't think the world is any more full of credulous buffoons. I think that the access we have to information is more likely to put people into almost a catatonic state when it comes to there's just too much information. I just can't figure it. I don't want to have to go through this. I don't want to have to research. How do I know? Here's a scientific expert. Here's an expert. Here's what the government said. Oh, that's the official government story. And so it's too much for most people. And so when anybody and everybody can look like an expert, can have their, I can produce video for YouTube that looks as good as what you're going to see on the nightly news with all the fancy graphics and everything else. I can put a lab coat on and pretend like I'm a doctor. And nobody has time to go in and do the sort of, okay, let me find which sources are trusted. And what I've learned from my own life is that when I find a source that I trust, I have to still be diligent. Because they're going to get it wrong at some point too. All of us are going to get it wrong. And for the average person running around just living their life, it's incredibly frustrating. It's like you have to be an expert on 500 things now just to be able to know which experts to listen to know what's going on. And it doesn't have to be that bad. It doesn't have to be that frustrating. If we can just change the way the conversations are had, such that instead of saying, here's what I believe because so-and-so said so, and I trust that source, here's what I'm convinced of, and my degree of confidence in that position is proportional to the actual evidence for it, such that if I'm wrong, if you start plucking away and saying, no, that bit of evidence that you evaluated is wrong, if that one's wrong and that one's wrong and that one's wrong, I can now change my mind. And it doesn't require somebody to go become an expert on everything. It just requires people to not be so absolutely cocksure of their positions and so desperate to never let go of them. That frustration of, wow, there's so much information out there, I have no way of figuring out what the truth is can be I can't even come up with the right word for it, clearly. It hinders anybody's, not just their ability to find the truth, but any desire they have to go find the truth. It's like, I just can't be bothered with that anymore. I got to go to work. I got to do this. I got to take care of my kids. I got to, follow what the rules are with regard to, this pandemic and other stuff. And in some cases, people are going to err on the side of caution, and that's nice. I'd prefer that rather than to going out like they did on Lake Travis this weekend and sinking boats. Yeah, it's not like there's a lot of chop there, so it takes a special type of like I did 8 years in the Navy. It takes some special skill to go out and sink several boats in Lake Travis. But I understand why people can look at this and say, "Oh my gosh, things are getting worse," or people are more credulous. I'm not convinced that's the case. I think what's happening is people fell into much broader, stricter paradigms. Like, I'm a Southern Baptist conservative, fundamentalist evangelical with these handful of positions, and so is everybody in my church. And then when people start finding out that, hey, maybe my church isn't right, maybe my social group isn't right, maybe these people who I assumed believe all the same things I do don't believe the same things I do. That can become daunting, because now when you thought you were in the in group, you could very quickly become someone in the out group. And that's the fear of, if it's one of the reasons why people will do this. I'm just not going to take a position on it. I'm religious, or not religious, but I'm spiritual. I'm not going to say that there is or isn't a God. I just think there's some higher. The fuzzier your language is, the more that you can keep it from being substantive at all, the better protected you are. And I think that is the mode that a lot of people are moving toward. Not to, hey, I believe more woo, but hey, I'm going to be much more fuzzy about everything that I believe so that I'm less likely to be exposed as being wrong.
Yeah. It's kind of like nailing Jell-O to the wall. They won't commit to a thing. So, and it's tough, especially when people's identity is wrapped up in those beliefs, and you don't want to really challenge the person's ego because it just is too hard, and they'll start doubling down. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I try. So I'm going to talk about this some on Thursday when the new show. So the new show is going to be called The Hang Up, because I'm evidently famous for hanging up on people and no, you're done, and just not But there's the thing you got to remember is on the show there's a bunch of people waiting on hold, and if the current caller isn't understanding and isn't being an honest interlocutor, and I think there's a likelihood of going on to another call, then hanging up is the right thing to do for everybody, because it gets that person out of the spotlight where they're just shooting themselves in the foot, and it moves on to somebody else. The problem with the religious discussions, maybe more so than some of the others, is that it really gets to the core of that person's identity. It's not just, I believe this. Like, I believe that if I drop a pencil, it's going to fall. That belief exists in my brain. It's warranted. It's supported by mountainous evidence. It's testable. And so it seems to occupy a belief state that is slightly different from, hey, I'm convinced that there's another realm that we can't interact with. And if you can point out to people, well, hang on, if you can't interact with it, how did you get any evidence to convince you that this is the case? Oh, well, I don't know. It's just fun. And if you start to push down on this too much, the degree to which someone has attached their core identity to that idea means that even if you're doing a good job of diligently attacking the idea and not the person, and not doing, this, your idea is irrational versus you are irrational. Mm-hmm. If you push back on that, the reaction is going to show you how critical this particular position is to that person's identity, because the defenses that come are going to be different. If this is just kind of part of them and they're really genuinely interested and curious, you can have a conversation where somebody will say, I hadn't thought about it that way. Well, what about this? What about this? And I had an hour and a half conversation with my uncle the other night, who's a former medical missionary, or a missionary. He's a medical doctor. And we had this conversation, and it was fine. Nobody yelled at anybody. I didn't hang up on him. And not just because he's family. I've done that many, many, many times. But the thing is, it can feel like I'm being attacked because you're attacking something that I hold very dear. It would be almost like saying your kids are ugly. Your spouse, your partner is stupid. When I say to somebody that I find the God described in the Bible to be a moral monster that is reprehensible, that sanctions many things that any common sense from anybody would say is wrong, like slavery or misogyny, or let's go slaughter an entire community of people but keep all the young virgin women for ourselves. Those things I find just despicable. And when I talk about this character, people are going to get upset. They're not going to get upset if I say Voldemort's evil, because they already agree with that. But if I said Harry Potter's evil, well, that's not going to impact them as much as the God thing. One of the prime examples that's come up many times in the last couple of weeks is Star Trek Voyager. Hi, all my Voyager fans. Janeway is an evil monster who is repeatedly immoral and outright killed a crew member in order to try to get back two crew members who she personally preferred to the new one. She killed Tuvix in order to get back Tuvok and Neelix. Now, it's an incredibly good moral dilemma to put in there, because I think for some of us, if we had someone that we truly cared about, someone who is we love, like a child, it would be an emotional, normal thing to say, yes, I'll kill that person over there if it lets me get my child back who just died yesterday. And that makes sense. Doesn't mean that it's moral. There's a reason why we don't generally have the surviving victims decide who is or isn't guilty and what their punishment should be. There's a reason we don't have that sort of vigilante justice. And when I bring up that example with Janeway, there are people who are huge Star Trek fans who are going to be mad at me for saying that because they like Janeway. And there's going to be others out there like, yes, I've been saying that for years. And everybody's going to take it to whatever degree they're invested in it. But very few people, even some of the biggest Star Trek fans, are going to think that I attacked them personally. And yet when you talk about something like religion, when you talk about just general core values, all of that feels personal. And that's why the conversations are so much harder in that realm than they are in whether or not, reflexology works. Mm-hmm. It doesn't, but I thought it.
Well, I've started listening to Janeway again, and I'm a huge Star Trek fan, but I've started watching Voyager again. So I'm gonna have to take a look and see if I agree with you on that. Maybe.
Good.
We'll see.
Good.
We'll see. I'll reserve my judgment until I've gone through it again. I haven't watched it recently enough to remember that. But it's really tough when most of these things do appeal to emotions, and when you have somebody who I think it was Mike Blakemore or some, and anyway said that when you have this sort of crisis of faith, if they have to question something that they believed about themselves, it sets up a sort of crisis of faith, and then they have to make a decision to either rationalize their current belief or to change it, which means changing a fundamental part of themselves. Yeah,
the way I look at it, and
Stackpole said that. Yeah, it was Stackpole. I'm sorry, the name escaped me for a moment. Michael Stackpole said that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So a couple things. One of them is that generally when we're presented with a claim that seems unfamiliar or foreign to us, the first reaction is, oh, that's weird, and we just chuck it aside and don't spend any more time on it. The second time you hear that claim, it's like, hey, I think I've heard that before. And then when you get to the third time, maybe there's a pattern. And this familiarity is another word for it is sort of normalcy. And so I, along with many other people, have been working towards this notion of atheist normalcy, so that instead of religious individuals and their beliefs having a privileged status in society, that we're all equal, which would be a really nice starting place there. And so for the people who this is their core belief, they think that you're attacking them because you're attacking their beliefs, that's the level of investment that is in there. But the process that we use to figure out what's believable is ultimately flawed, because people are expecting the likelihood that they can be absolutely sure about something. And that's just not the way anything works. I mean, science is providing tentative explanations, which is how they get to complain that science keeps offering revisions. But the revisions, in every example I can think of, get us consistently closer to accurate. What we found is, we thought it worked this way and we were 95% right, and now we're 97% right with this change. It's really difficult to have these conversations and to not get upset. There are people, when talking about the atheist experience, it's like, I'll be sitting here having a calm conversation with somebody and someone in chat will go, gosh, Matt's so angry. And I'm like, I've been frustrated. I've been irritated. I have been outraged at immoral suggestions from callers that abuse victims deserved it, or that slavery is okay, or whatever. I'm very rarely, I don't know that I've ever actually been angry on it. And then I had to get over that, because people be like, oh, you're so angry. And I get what they're saying. It's not angry as in furious. It's not angry as in hostile or irate and violent. They're just using it as a colloquialism, like, you are displeased. Well, hell yeah, I'm displeased. I'm displeased almost every day when I wake up, and the world still doesn't make sense. And I'm in a sensible minority.
Damage report.
Yeah, it's like, if you're not upset, you're not paying attention.
Right.
And this gets back to there's too much to pay attention to, so I'm not going to pay attention to anything.
Right. So let's see. I was going to make a very clever point, and it's escaping me at the moment. Oh, so one of the very frustrating things is that this sort of credibility is now become, or not even credulousness, but this acceptance of non-scientific sort of ways of thinking and lack of critical thinking has managed to infiltrate itself into our government. And so now those are the people that are setting policies and laws and frustrating our attempts to fight this virus. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it's not as easy. I can sit down with a one-on-one conversation with somebody. I can talk to someone, take a question from someone at an event with a whole bunch of people and have some reasonable hope of progress in the discussion. When it gets to the political lines that we've drawn and the battles and the positions that people are taking on either side, I'm not as convinced that that as much progress is likely in normal conversations, there seems to be a need for some big systemic changes. And there's no easy answer, because the first thing that pops into mind when you're thinking about this is, what we need is like, here's the website that is the super fact checker and it's the truth. And all we need is just to point everybody to that website. There's a bunch of those out there. And all that happened was the people on one side of an issue and the people on the other side of an issue just deny that source is accurate. And if all people are going to be doing is denying, because what they want is the power base that comes along with it. That's the key difference, is that when I have a conversation with someone about their God belief, that's very personal. It can get to their core. It can be emotional. It can be upsetting. If I talk to somebody about their religious belief, it's the same in the sense that this is about who they identify as and what they value the most and what kind of world they want to see. And they've spent some time thinking about it. And by golly, they couldn't be wrong because they're a smart person. And then you talk about what's going to happen in systemic politics, where there's money involved, where there's power involved, where there's corporate interests involved, where just getting reelected seems to be a goal more than, hey, while I'm here, before I have to leave office, why don't I get some stuff done? It has become a make work job. As much as people want to complain about, oh, we're just doing these make work jobs, in many ways, our elected officials are often, not always, I don't want to pretend like because what they do has an impact, and we can't forget that. While we can sit here and be frustrated that everybody's drawn their lines, they circle the wagons more than they ever have, and they're going to stick with their positions, and they're going to stay entrenched no matter what. We also have to remember that there are people here, and there are decisions being made, and you're going to have an election here in November, and people are going to vote, and we're going to end up with a president. And that president is going to nominate and appoint Supreme Court justices that will be there for life. That means that the potential for...
Uh-oh. Oh, dear. Are you there, Matt?
Matt, we lost you again. I don't know if you can hear me.
Do we have video at least?
We got video.
He just figured it out. Okay. Again, if you have any comments about our Skeptic track live and streaming, you can email Derek at skeptrack.org or Angie at skeptrack.org, and let us know what you think about. I'm really kind of impressed that we've only had a couple of technical difficulties over the course of the weekend, but the ones that we've had have been kind of doozies. But anyway, so we're working on that right now. Hopefully it won't be too much longer, but let us know if there are any speakers that you'd like to see. It sounds like Matt's back.
Yeah, it's a quick fix. So there's a problem with the mixer that I use. It hasn't happened too much during AXP, but it's happened already twice during this. Mm-hmm. And all it is I have to unplug and plug the USB cable back in.
Oh.
It's a driver issue where it doesn't like this mixer. So we'll be making changes.
Well, we were talking about people who are making the politics and the people who support them, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think there are people who I think we can fairly and easily identify who are hypocritical. You know, if I look at somebody like Falwell Jr., who's been in the news quite a bit recently, I don't care what his personal kinks and whatever are. I care about the hypocrisy and the fact that he's going to stand up there and pretend to have a set of values when in fact his values are very different. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that a number of us, if he weren't such a hypocritical ass who's pretending to be holier than thou, probably could have gone out and drank and partied with the guy and had a good time if he, weren't so busy trying to pretend. There's dishonesty, and it's difficult to call people out on it, because if you say, you're a liar, then what you're saying is somebody's intentionally deceiving. And I don't think that's the case most of the time. I think that what they're doing is kind of rationalizing and tap dancing. And it's like, I believe this, but in this circumstance, I can't quite say that because it won't go as well with my particular group. I think maybe if we had like full, I don't know. I was gonna go down a road of full anonymity. so that people could identify maybe we get better statistics. And it does help when we're doing statistical research to allow people to be anonymous. On the other hand, that's how you get 4chan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not such a good outcome from that. We are still taking questions if anyone would like to ask them of Matt. So what's one of your biggest surprises that you faced during your tenure on the Atheist Experience and during your interactions with folks?
I'm surprised that after 15 years, I'm still doing it. Not completely surprised, because I love it and I'll do it for another 15 years. But when I first started doing it, it was, there was a part of me that was really optimistic that, I'm going to do this and I'm going to write a book, which still hasn't finished yet, but I'm going to find the magic argument that solves this and fixes the world. I know that's not from the beginning, I knew that wouldn't actually happen. But I hoped that I would get closer and closer to whatever that magic argument would look like if it existed. And I learned pretty quickly that people believe for different reasons. They're going to give up those beliefs for different reasons. They're going to change their mind for different reasons. And you can't just assume that just because somebody has a particular belief that their reason for holding it is the same. And so while I have pet peeves, like I hate repeating myself, I don't like having my time wasted. And yet people will be like, you've hosted a TV show for 15 years where you repeat yourself over and over again. How can that not be time wasting? And I'm like, yes, I do the show every week, and some of you watch every week, but I'm talking to somebody new. Every week I'm somebody's first introduction to skepticism, to humanism, to atheism. Every week I'm somebody's first introduction to, hey, I know your holy book better than you, and I don't accept it. I'm somebody's first introduction to the evil, angry atheist, or the skeptic who just can't open their mind enough to accept the wonderful, beyond world that people are talking about. I'm not surprised that the world has become more secular and is trending that way, because we have that data. I think the biggest surprises I've had were the things that I view as the biggest negative step backs, like the increase in the prevalence of people trying to claim that the earth is flat. That floored me. Like that came out of nowhere. Vaccine deniers, vaccine autism connection crap, all that stuff. We had been dealing with that the entire time that I've been in the community. Mm-hmm. The flat earth thing just seemed to come out of nowhere and take off at a rate that I would have never guessed. And as a matter of fact, if you go back, I know in early episodes of the Atheist Experience, I used examples like, hey, nobody believes in Thor anymore. And then I start hearing from people who believe in Thor. And I'm not just talking about like Marvel Thor. I'm talking about real people who are, believe in this particular deistic pantheon. And now they're like, wow, nobody believes in a flat earth anymore. And I would get email from people saying, really, nobody ever really did. That's just kind of a misunderstanding about history, and nobody ever really thought the world was flat. And I'm like, yeah, I think they did. And now it doesn't matter whether they did in the past, because they do today.
Yeah, that's kind of shocking, isn't it? So
I'm less concerned about people who think the world is flat in the direct harm that view can do. But the thought process that leads one to conclude that the world is most likely flat, that thought process is going to get used to assess other things like healthcare issues, like individual rights issues, like how do we make decisions about the world? And if you have a heuristic, a model in your head that leads you to a conclusion like the world is likely flat, how many more positions are you going to have that are horribly broken, and how dangerous are some of those? If somebody gets on a boat and tries to sail to the edge and see the big tall wall because they saw a screenshot from Game of Thrones that somebody told them was real. Okay, cool. Then they've wasted some time and everything else. On the other hand, those errors in thinking can lead to parents who decide to pray rather than going to see a doctor, and then their child dies. It can lead to individuals holding views that marginalize members of their family because of their sexual orientation or their LGBTQ plus status just in general. And then to begin legislating about what rights and freedoms those people have. Because if you're right and you're on the side of righteousness, and this is what the world should be like, then you have a duty to do those things. And part of me would jokingly say, I think that we could fix everything, or at least make it better, if we could just get people to not take their religious views so seriously. On the other hand, that's not the solution. It's never going to be the solution. The people who don't take their religious views seriously are one of the ones who, in my experience, are potentially the most dangerous. Because the ones that take it seriously, the people who believe in like a fundamentalist evangelical notion, when they can be shown that they don't have a good reason to believe that and they change their mind, they then become more reasonable and are activists. Many of the activists for atheism, secularism, skepticism. The people who don't take it that seriously, the reason I say they're often more dangerous is they have no motivation to change their mind. They don't care what the truth is. They don't care about the evidence of the data. It's just, oh, well, I don't believe what those people believe. I believe this fuzzy thing. So they set themselves up in this cordoned off area that's impervious to attack. And yet, is that person more likely to tilt more and more towards the rational or more and more towards the irrational? And it's going to depend on what that person believes and who that person is. But one thing that's clear, when I have a fundamentalist Christian, 15, 16-year-old, 28-year-old, 53-year-old, 75-year-old, who gives up their religious belief for good reasons, just recognizing, hey, I don't have a good reason to believe this. We have definitely helped someone to be a better critical thinker and to be less wrong. That's not necessarily possible with someone who's like, well, you believe what you believe and I believe what I believe. Hey, why do we have to argue about this? Can't we just agree to disagree? Oh, wait, there's a supernatural realm. I don't really know that much about it, but I'm absolutely convinced that, my socks are lucky and I'm going to go bowl a perfect game. And if I don't bowl a perfect game, it's just because I didn't pray hard enough. Or this process along there is the fuzzier they keep it, the less there is to aim for. You need good sights on the target.
Yeah, it's tough. You got to get people to define their terms and define what they mean. And I've seen you on the show and how difficult it is for you to get people to understand how important it is to define your terms.
Yeah, it's difficult to get anybody to even answer a question.
It is.
That's becoming incredibly frustrating because I will ask a question like, yesterday on the show there was a brief discussion about morality, and I would ask the person, do you feel that this is morally wrong? And instead of saying yes or no, which to me are the only two answers, or I don't know, but instead of saying anything remotely like that, let's go off in a different direction. And now, the temptation is to say, he sees where you're going and he senses a trap. And so he doesn't want to have this conversation. So he's, the defense mechanisms of his superstition and religious belief are now shifting his brain so that he doesn't have to go down the path that you're trying to go. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably what's happening quite often. I do not think that it is intentional or conscious or a conscious decision most of the time. I don't think people are actively trying to be dishonest. Now, the last caller on Sunday's show, I actually do think was intentionally being dishonest because he called in to correct me on what the Bible says about slavery. And so I read him what the Bible says about slavery. And then he said, that's not what it says. And then we had him read it and he read it. And then he still said, that's not what it says. He literally read Exodus 21:20, where it says that you're allowed to beat your slaves as long as they don't die within a couple of days. And then he said, that doesn't say you can beat your slaves. And I was just like, okay, at this point, I no longer believe that you're real or a sincere caller. It's, we talk about how do I tell what's true from all the various news sources I believe or I have access to. Similar things happen on the show when I'm having conversations with people. Every single caller could be a prank caller. We've had plenty of them. We've had people who called in to pretend to believe something in order to get a clip or a soundbite for their prank calling YouTube show or whatever it was. The thing is, while, I can pretend to read minds and on stage and do a pretty good job of it, I can't actually read minds. And so if there's a caller that says this is what they believe, I have to kind of take them at their word until the evidence that they're lying is overwhelming. Because if I start off by saying, I don't believe you're a liar, I'd hang up every call in 10 or 15 seconds. There would be no discussions on the show because I'd be like, I just can't. I have more confidence and more, I have more faith, for lack of a better word, that you're not an idiot And so I want to let you continue because clearly I'm the one who's misunderstood something here until the evidence shows otherwise.
Well, it looks like we're kind of coming up on time, but we really appreciate your joining us. And I'll tell you, I never... Oh, wait, we do have a question. Are you familiar with the book The Catalyst by Jonah Berger, and what do you think of his ideas about changing minds?
I'm not familiar with it, but I'm adding it to the notes for this, and I'll check it out. The Catalyst by Jonah Berger.
Jonah Berger. Berger is the spelling provided.
Cool, thank you. I'm not familiar with it, so that's an easy question to answer because
Well,
I get to
okay.
say I don't know.
Okay. Well, I can tell you I never doubt your sincerity, and I can tell you not to doubt mine when I say thank you very much for joining us. You're always a very, very welcome guest. And
Thank you. I hope I'll be there in person next year. I hope we get past all this and we can all have a good time again.
Absolutely. I hope so, too. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us on our streaming Skeptic track for Dragoncon 2020. We'll all be screaming soon. But we hope to, if you have any suggestions, I mentioned several times, Derek at skeptrack.org or Angie at skeptrack.org. I'm your Assistant Director, Dr. Angie. Bye, y'all.
As fun as all this streaming content is, we sincerely cannot wait to see you all in person again next year. Remember to stay healthy and safe until then. Wear a mask when interacting with other people out in the real world. Want more Skeptrack? Get more than 10 years of Skeptics track programming at our video archive. video.skeptrack.org